Cheers and salutations. Welcome to Americans Learn. And I got to say, we have a awesome video to talk about and to get our learn on. And joining me here is my great colleague, Daniel, who's in the house.
Hey guys.
So we continue our ongoing fantastic adventure by covering the Pacific War week by week, done none other than by kings and generals. Again, please support the original content creators because we're going to be looking at a lot of their videos. And folks, a lot of time and effort has been put into making these videos, a lot of research. So do the correct thing and support also the original content creators. Please give us your feedback as well of some of our thoughts of what we say because we want to hear from you, our viewing audience. So again, we will be fast forwarding the sponsors because Daniel, I think it's fair to say that the deal might have already kind of sort of maybe expired.
Yeah, and generally speaking, I know most of you guys watching, you already saw this. You just want to see how we react to it. Let's be real, what's going on here? I see the analytics.
Yes, of course. Very, very fair. Very fair. But I think without further ado, because we could talk here all day, we continue on with our adventure. And this video is titled, and I want to make sure I get it correct. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
no, it's not that. It's called Japan Continues Attacking Borneo, the Philippines, Pacific War, number 4, animated history documentary. So we'll go ahead and check it out. Daniel, real quick, what's going on?
I just wanted to say I'm really excited because I don't know a whole lot about the intricacies of how Japan attacked Southeast Asia after Pearl Harbor. So I'm really excited to continue learning how this all played out.
From the basic knowledge I got in regards to Japan attacking all of Southeast Asia was a lot of the colonial powers, the French, the British, and yes, even the Americans who occupied the Philippines, as the Philippines were an American territory, were completely unprepared. They did not have the military expertise or the advancement of technology, and again, they were not seasoned enough to take on the veteran forces of the Empire of Japan. So, so I'm curious to know more about just what else.
Yeah, I remember when we were in the last video, that was a big part of what I was really grasping onto, is what you just said, that all these people, like none of the good commanders were there, none of the good troops were there, they didn't have logistics, everyone was focused on Europe, and no one was focused on here, and no one was making defending this area a priority, and Japan now has a very veteran, experienced series of armies that are making this movement with modern weaponry and a very brutal attitude on top of that.
Agreed, 100%. So without further ado, since I'm in charge of the ones and twos, let's pull this up and get ready to get our learn on right now.
On December 7th, 1941, the war had reached the Pacific to the surprise of the Allied nations, drastically changing the course of history forever. After its first week, smoke darkened the horizons of Pearl Harbor. Hundreds of British soldiers lay dead on the battlefields of Malaya and Hong Kong. The Philippines and Wake Island had tasted their first blood, and Guam and the Gilbert Islands had already fallen into Japanese hands. The situation looked grim for the Allies, and this week would do nothing but confirm that the rising sun was really on the rise.
I just want to point out, can you imagine how different the war would have played out if Japan was able to secure a peace treaty with China and freed up all those troops? Maybe not change the outcome, but it would have lengthened the hell out of it.
Yeah, there is always the what if. I mean, again, I've stated my opinion on alternate history and what if. Like the one trope I hate the most is what if the Axis powers ran World War II? This was never going to happen, folks.
What if America decided not to use weapons?
Yeah,
and decided to go to a vacation in Australia instead of joining the war.
Yeah, it's
What
just
if
like,
Russia just gave up and didn't fight back at all and just surrendered everything immediately?
yeah, that again, things that'll never happen. I'll take for 300, Bobby. So there you go. But look, folks, if Japan was able to do things, if they weren't so gung ho on, or some of their soldiers or generals weren't so gung ho in destroying diplomacy as well as the diplomatic reputation of the Empire of Japan, maybe things would have been different. Maybe,
That could have
kind of,
made
sorta.
that could have
But
made a big difference there.
we may never know, because the actions that the Empire of Japan was taking was brutal, harsh, and it just led to their own demise. Same thing that happened in Nazi Germany,
Yeah.
led to their own demise.
It's funny. It's like, hey, America, can you explain the things that you do to declare war? Well, we usually, back then at least, we wait until we're attacked, and then Congress and the president confer, and then we declare war, and then we mobilize. Japan, how do you guys declare war? Well, some of our officers sometimes get bored.
Yeah, Johnny, he's very special. He gets a little excited. Anyways.
So today we're going to cover the continuation of the Japanese expansion across the Pacific and the start of the Battle of Borneo. If you're interested in learning more about the world wars,
and we do apologize for fast forwarding, here's what you can do for us then, and for Kings and Generals. Support the original content creators, and be sure to support all their other work too. They're doing a lot of dedicated research into many aspects of military history and battles. So support the original content creators, because that's the right thing to do. Again, we also say this too because maybe the sponsorship has already expired, and maybe said sponsors might not like us.
I gotta say, guys watching, I think we have given you a good amount of disclaimers on these. I think going forward, we're just gonna skip without saying anything.
Yes, but still, it's there you go.
Yeah, you know our logic.
We've already discussed the plans and the start of operations against most of the main objectives for Japanese expansion, but still there's one we haven't talked about. The Dutch East Indies, probably the most important objective of the Japanese because of its richness in petroleum oil, rubber, nickel, tin, scrap iron, and other strategic resources.
Gotta have that nickel.
Covered a wide area with long distances for the different Japanese task forces to travel. This is why Japan didn't plan to attack the Indies straight away. Instead, they had planned to first secure footholds on Malaya, the Philippines, and British Borneo, so that they could then launch multiple subsequent attacks against critical locations in the Indies, most importantly, their oil fields. The Dutch, meanwhile, had seen their homeland invaded and occupied by Nazi Germany back in May of 1940. Queen Wilhelmina and the Dutch government had managed to escape to London by May 13th, where they established a government in exile. But despite this, they were now unable to defend their colonial possessions in the east. There, the Royal Netherlands East Indies Army of Lieutenant General Hein te Poorten tried to modernize as fast as possible in view of a possible Japanese invasion.
Now, here's something interesting. Okay, I never heard of this individual, because most of the time or at least when I was a kid and we were covering world history and the Second World War, you only hear about the big perspectives like the Empire of Japan, Nazi Germany, the United States, Great Britain, France, and eventually the French Resistance, the Soviet Union, occasionally Italy. I got to add in little Mussolini there at the end. But you never hear about the other factions and generals and other people involved. So again, something I never knew.
By December of 1941, the army had grown to 85,000 personnel, albeit inadequately equipped and poorly trained. Te Poorten also counted with a sizable air force, although the 389 aircraft they had were old and decisively outclassed by superior Japanese planes. In the Kalimantan area of Borneo, the Dutch had two important western airfields that were unknown to the Japanese, from which they could conduct air operations against the enemy. They also had strong garrisons in all major cities of Dutch Borneo, although they would not see fighting this week. The ones that would see fighting would be the defenders in British Borneo. This area was not only important for the Japanese to act as a stepping stone for the invasion of the Dutch East Indies, but it also had valuable oil fields in Miri and Sarai, which made them huge objectives. Marshal Brooke Popham had assigned the 2nd Battalion of the 15th Punjab Regiment to defend the cities of Kuching and Miri, while the local rulers of Sarawak organised a paramilitary force, the Sarawak Rangers, defending the rest of the province. These forces were then grouped into the Sarawak Force, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Lane. The Japanese plan consisted of an initial attack against Miri and Sarai.
Go ahead.
It still blows my mind that we don't have a lot of pictures of a lot of these high-ranking people.
Well, we have to look back at the time too. I mean, yes, obviously there was a big difference in regards to access to photography and videos and cameras.
But it was still pretty. I mean, at that point, photography was pretty ubiquitous. I mean,
yeah, I hear you, but also
all you need is one bloke with a camera at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be a self-portrait or maybe a picture, because it could be that maybe the awesome people, Kings and Generals, just don't have one. There wasn't one ready accessible.
That could be true too. Yeah.
So the thing is, like, readily accessible. Where can you find said portrait? It might be hard to get a hold of. So there you go.
Guys, we're going in depth. I'm not going to fly to Indonesia to look at some old records to find a photo to put right there.
I mean, again, it could be various reasons.
With the objective of securing their oil fields, followed by a main amphibious assault against Kuching.
One other thing here too, taking a photograph, even back then, was a privilege and pretty expensive to do.
Well, yeah, but he's a lieutenant colonel.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
And the nearby airfields. This operation would be carried out by the Kawaguchi Detachment, mainly composed of the 35th Brigade of the 124th Infantry Regiment, under the command of Major General Kawaguchi Kiyotake. They would also be escorted and supported by a small fleet under Rear Admiral Kurita Takio, consisting of 3 cruisers, 6 destroyers, and 746 SNLF Marines. On December 13th, the Kawaguchi Detachment left Kamran Bay in 10 transport ships, heading to British Borneo. The following day saw the Japanese pressing on the heels of the Indian defenders at Gurun, while on Wake Island, Japanese bombardments in the last 2 days left only 1 Wildcat operational. Major Putnam would then start working straight away to repair as many of his planes as possible, with the first repaired Wildcat successfully made operational later that evening. December 15th saw the first major fighting of the week, with the Japanese first assault against Hong Kong Island. After a heavy bombardment and repeated British refusals to surrender, General Sakai ordered a night assault in improvised rafts, but this first attempt would be repelled by machine gun fire while the Japanese attempted to cross the harbour. Meanwhile, in Johnston and Palmyra, after the first attack by a submarine returning from Pearl Harbor that luckily didn't do so much damage, a new attack was launched by Japanese submarines that caused serious damage to a powerhouse. And back in Malaya, the 5th Division finally attacked down the road and managed to penetrate deep into the 6th Brigade's defences. This prompted General Murray Lyon to order a complete withdrawal south of the Muda River, then continuing some 30 miles south to establish defensive positions on the Kirian River, which didn't sit well with General Percival's objective of reducing the air threat on Singapore, as he needed to hold the Japanese as far north as possible to keep the air forces out of range. And yet he could not prevent his generals from retreating in the face of superior firepower. On the next day, 2 detachments of the 56th Division completed preparation.
I mean, if they're not ready, then they're not ready. I mean, you can put up the best fight, but do you want a complete decimation of your forces, or at least retreat and maybe live to fight another day?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, so, I've been following a bit about like what's been happening, especially with the Russian conscripts currently in the current war. And one thing that I've been told repeatedly is, if your troops aren't trained, put them in entrenched positions and tell them to not let anything pass, and they're at least useful.
Yeah, there you go.
Conduct amphibious invasions on Davao and the Sulu Islands, intending to secure a southern airfield on the Philippines, and to prepare further attacks on Borneo from Jolo. The detachments were under the general command of Major General Sakaguchi Shizuo, and they would depart Palau en route to Davao later that day. Meanwhile, in Borneo, the main body of the Kawaguchi detachment successfully landed on Miri and Serai in the early hours of December 16th. They were met with little resistance, and thus could occupy their oil fields and airfields with ease. SNLF Marines also landed on the coast near Lutong, and managed to occupy its important oil refinery. Immediately, the Japanese would start working on restoring the captured oil fields.
You know what
while
this reminds me
Kawaguchi
of?
prepared his force.
Go ahead.
I feel like I'm just getting freedom vibes.
Oh, yeah, got to get the oil. Got it.
Mhm.
Well, hey, oil is the lifeblood. And the thing is, the one thing that Nazi Germany and the Empire Japan needed for their growing military industrial complex was the blood of oil, so there you
But
go.
but it's just like that's why they're here. That's why they're at war, is for this.
Yep. And the thing is, it's just for me, it shows that there was no real end game. I think that the military mindset in Japan was we're going to keep on doing this forever, glorious conquest, building an empire, and this is how it's going to do. There was no peace in our time.
This was
initiative.
literally, we need additional resources to keep fighting.
Yeah, and it's not a sustainable plan. You might be able to win, but can you hold and maintain and do a forever war against other global powers? That's not a winning tactic.
Forces for their main assault on Kuching, which we'll cover next week. The following day, however, Dutch reconnaissance from Singkawang learned about the Japanese invasion and then launched an air attack over Miri, although it was unsuccessful. On December 17th, the Japanese were also hit by the Chengpu earthquake, which caused considerable damage in Taiwan. It seems Japan was fighting even nature itself at this point. At the same time, with the Japanese fiercely pressing on and defeating the Indian defenders, General Percival finally decided to order a general withdrawal south of the Perak River, trying to hold on to northern Malaya as much as he could. Although he realized that the two Indian divisions were heavily outgunned, he could not send the 8th Australian Division away from Johor in fear of a possible Japanese naval invasion that would jeopardize his entire defense of Singapore. Instead, the 9th Indian Division was ordered to defend the Kuantan airfield and Murray Leon's eastern flank, while the battered 11th Indian Division saw two of its brigades reorganize into one and reinforce the 12th Brigade. The withdrawal also meant the abandonment of Penang Island, one of the main British settlements in Malaya. But before it got abandoned, the British would evacuate all of its European population, leaving the local inhabitants to the mercy of the Japanese, something that would come back to haunt them after the end of the war. In the meantime, despite some fierce aerial bombardment,
Actions have consequences, unfortunately.
and in the last 2 days, the defenders at Wake Island successfully managed to recuperate another of its wildcats. And at Hong Kong, the Japanese saw that they were now ready for their main assault on the island. In the last days, they had constructed enough boats for the crossing, and they had destroyed half of the pillboxes between North Point and the Liamen Straits, leaving a pall of dense black smoke over the area that gave them perfect cover for an attack. Even better, General Maltby expected them to attack again across Victoria Harbour, so the area was lightly defended.
That is so oh my god, look! Hold on. Oops, there was some static. There was some static right there.
It's crazy because it's like, I mean, I'm not a general, but I would assume that if an amphibious landings are one of the hardest, highest casualty operations you can really do as an army or a marine force or whatever it might be, maybe they're going to attack the place that's weaker. Because it doesn't matter where they get a foothold, as long as they get a foothold.
Yeah, and especially if you have smoke covering you. I mean, come on, treat every area as though it's a threat. I mean, you guys are not going to get reinforcements anytime soon.
General Sakai then planned to conduct a two-pronged amphibious assault, with 2 regiments embarking from the Kai Tak airport towards the Taiku docks, and with another one crossing the Liamen Straits into Saiwan. At night on December 18th, the crossing commenced, getting halfway undetected, and successfully completing the crossing a few hours later. Early in the morning of December 19th, the Japanese 38th Division had already overrun the depleted Rajput defenders, taking several major key points along the coast. In response, Maltby established a new defensive line at Leighton Hill and tried to reinforce the center of the island as fast as he could, but it was already too late, with the Japanese surrounding the Wangnaechong Gap after a few hours of fighting. There, the British defenders resisted fiercely, but their attempt to escape failed, and they were cut down by machine gun fire across the gap. Maltby quickly rushed his troops to counterattack, but the operation was very badly planned and executed, although the British defenders would incredibly manage to get close to Wangnaechong. Yet despite their best efforts, the superior firepower of the Japanese forced them to retreat in the end. With the fall of the Wangnaechong Gap, the center of the island was firmly under the control of the Japanese, and they would spend the next day consolidating their control over the area before launching their main attack against Victoria City. The situation looked dire for Maltby, and he could only try to reorganize his depleted and dispersed forces to mount a limited defense of the colonial capital.
Again, it's just it could have been avoided if you looked at the area where the enemy could have got the most cover, and you chose to not defend it fully. It's just this is why we're in this situation right now, folks.
Yeah, and even if they were going to be overwhelmed anyway, I would like there to be less Japanese veterans at the next battle.
Yes, exactly. And now, not only that, does he have to deal with the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, another 3rd battalion. He's dealing with 5 different battalions and 3 whole regiments. Well, technically 6 battalions and 3 whole regiments. So, yeah, it's not looking good, buddy.
Don't forget to check out our video on the Battle of Hong Kong if you want a more in-depth look at the events of the battle. We know you'll not be disappointed. Meanwhile, in Miri, the invaders were subjected to 2 more Dutch air attacks in the last 2 days, which would fail to inflict heavy damage on the Japanese, although one of the Dutch flying boats would successfully manage to sink the destroyer Shinonome, killing its 228 crew. And on the last day of the week, the American defenders on Wake would learn of great news, as a PBY landed in the lagoon and told them that a relief expedition was already on its way. Back on December 10th, Admiral Kimmel had created Task Force 14 under the command of Rear Admiral Frank Fletcher, consisting of 3 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, the carrier Saratoga, the VMF 211 Squadron, and 210 Marines from the 4th Defense Battalion.
Hell yeah, there you go. USMC all the way. There you go. I'm gonna throw down for the Marine Corps. There you go.
They would depart Pearl Harbor on December 15th, heading as fast as they could to reinforce the defenders at Wake. Kimmel had also created Task Force 11 under Rear Admiral Wilson Brown, consisting of the carrier Lexington, 3 heavy cruisers, and 9 destroyers, with the task of striking Japanese bases thought to exist at Jeluit, and with the objective of diverting Japanese forces away from Task Force 14. With help finally on its way, morale on Wake Island was very high. But unbeknownst to them, due to his failure to defend Pearl Harbor, Admiral Kimmel was relieved of his command of the Pacific Fleet on December 17th, being temporarily replaced by Vice Admiral.
The American flag in the background isn't the one that we have. It's a 48 star flag. This is before Hawaii and Alaska were made into states, and I just want to say I have in my possession a 48 star flag.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Cool.
Now, technically, at least according to I think not American law, but I think it does have to be ceremoniously taken care of. You just can't throw it away. If you are to throw away an outdated American or used up American flag, it has to be ceremoniously burned, I believe. I think. I could be wrong on that one. If there's an expert in how to properly dispose of an American flag, you just don't throw it out. That's not the correct thing to do. Yes. There's a far more efficient way in doing that.
William Pye. Pye had his reservations about the relief expedition, but he still allowed it to continue for the moment, although on December 21st, he would finally decide to recall both task forces back to Pearl Harbor. This week would also end with a terrible outcome for the American defenders in the Philippines. On Davao, the Sakaguchi and Miura detachments finally landed under the cover of night. The city defenders, consisting of a single regiment of the Philippine 101st Division, were taken completely by surprise, yet they offered as much resistance as they could. With the Miura detachment suffering many casualties, General Sakaguchi was forced to order forward some of his forces reserved for the attack on the Sulu Islands. Together, these forces would storm and take the city by midday, and a final attack would then be carried out against the remaining Filipino defenders behind the Davao River, finally forcing them to retreat northwestwards. Upon reaching Davao, the Japanese soldiers would be cheered by the sizable Japanese population of the city, liberating them from the warehouses in which they had been detained at the start of the war. While the battered Miura detachment stayed to garrison Davao and continued the liberation of Japanese inhabitants, the Sakaguchi detachment would prepare to continue onwards towards Jolo on the Sulu Islands, and then to Tarakan in Dutch Borneo. Thus, this week ends with another Japanese victory, and next week we'll see them achieve tremendous successes as they continue their expansion across the Pacific. So make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see the next video in the series. Please consider liking, commenting, and sharing. It helps immensely.
And I think that's a great note to end it on. So first of all, there's a lot to unpack here. We are seeing Japan successfully attack, the Dutch East Indies, the Philippines, Hong Kong. So again, another round to take on Wake Island and so much more. It's quite clear. And I think for all of you who are at least very familiar with the history of World War II, as well as the situation in the Pacific Theater, Japan has had a string of major victories because many of the powers in that region were ill prepared. And as Daniel's pointed out, all the focus was on Europe at the time. But I want to give the final word to Daniel. Daniel, thoughts, questions, comments, concerns?
Not a lot. I think that this did a good job of introducing what's happening now. It seems like a lot more is being set up than actually happening, although stuff did definitely happen.
I feel like this is also the kind of build up towards the big battle and the turning point of the war, which would be the victory at Midway. Midway was, at least according to a lot of experts, and again, if I'm wrong on this one, audience, I want you to correct me. Midway was a turning point, at least in this part of the theater, for World War II. So, go ahead, Dan. I
was going to say that I think, well, in the meantime, before Midway happens, they are going to take all of this over.
Yes, exactly. And then comes the arduous fight to, I guess, remove the Empire of Japan. And just want to say again, don't worry, MacArthur. The Marines will get back the Philippines for you, okay? We got you. We got you. We got you. We got you. Don't worry. All right, folks. We're out of here. I'm Kit. This is Daniel. This has been Americans Learn. We'll see you next time on the flip side.